Welcome friends to another r/NuclearRevenge video. Today we've got some great stories, and our first story of the day is 3rd grade bully. In the 3rd grade, I was an awkward kid. Had a mean, drunk father, struggled to fit in and make friends, was bullied and shunned by the other kids. One of my classmates, let's call him Derek, who regularly partook in bullying me, showed me kindness one day. Being deprived of kindness or attention so regularly, I was putty in his hands. He hanged out with me during recess when I was usually alone. We laughed and talked about girls we like. He even apologized for being a jerk to me. The reason he was nice to me was because I'd brought a very popular, expensive Batman action figure to school with me to pass the time, since I was alone mostly. I saved allowance and mowed lawns for 2 months to buy that toy. Everyone wanted one. By the end of the day, he asked me if he could lend the action figure, and like the naive, socially inept kid I was, I trusted him with it. The deal was to return it the following morning. I went home so happy, completely fooled, I never suspected a thing. The following day, he completely ignored me. When I tried to talk to him, he acted like I was crazy. When I asked him to return the action figure, he simply said, "You never gave me any Batman. Maybe you imagined it." And when I persisted, he threatened to beat my butt. When I complained to my teacher, I was told that it was my own fault for bringing toys to school. I was afraid they would involve my father, so I dropped it. I couldn't let my father know, or I would be called a softie and have my butt beat and punished for the next 2 weeks. What's worse is Derek told all the girls that I confided to him about fancying, that I lusted after them and that I pleased myself to them. I was a social outcast before that, but at least I was tolerated. But after his smear campaign with the girls, I was a leper. People wouldn't even look me in the eyes, not even the teachers. Kids started throwing stones at me, sabotaged and vandalized my property. It was heck. I did nothing about it but cry. I was just a weak-willed kid after all, but to this day, I wish I'd bit someone's ear off or something. Anything in retaliation. After a while, the bullying died down. I focused on my studies and started getting good grades. Derek started talking to me again, but I ignored him completely. Sometimes he would repeat, "Why are you being such a baby? You didn't give me anything. You imagined it." By the end of the year, we moved houses and I transferred to another school not far away. Things were much better there. I finally had friends and I wasn't as naive anymore, so I wasn't as easily targeted. But I was still mostly me and still got picked on now and then. Over the years, I became somewhat of a delinquent, and in high school, I got into regular fights. I may have been overcompensating for the lack of a spine I had in my younger years. I bartended in nightclubs, hotels, and cruise liners in my early 20s. This helped me a lot to be more socially adept and to understand social dynamics and human nature. I finished trade school and qualified as an electrician and later as a plumber. I know, water and electricity, but believe it or not, I thought it was ingenious at the time. I started my own business, developed a reputation for excellent workmanship in my local area, and did well for myself. When I was 29, I'm 36 now, I received a call out at 2 in the morning for a flooding emergency at a local residence. When I got there, the place was a mess. Water was jetting out of a burst pipe, and electrical equipment was shorted. It was highly dangerous. The living room floor was caved in due to a sinkhole. I was met by the wife, let's call her Jane, hysterical and beside herself. She somehow thought that she was responsible, which I found odd. I assured her that it couldn't possibly be her fault. He arrived not 5 minutes later. His demeanor was irate. He didn't greet or shake my hand when I offered. I recognized him immediately, Derek from all those years ago. He demanded to know why I haven't begun fixing the issue yet. I was professional. I told him what I told the wife in terms of costs, but I hid the written quote in my vehicle. I told him who I was and acted happy to see him, assured him that he was in good hands. After a while of arguing with his wife, he seemed to calm down and joke around with me. I knew I had fooled him. We talked about our careers, kids, our school days. I gave him tips and fake recommendations. We got along great. His trust was easy to gain. He must have thought of me as a complete sucker. I assured him that he was in good hands and this would be fixed in no time. I was careful not to start any actual work on the property. Doing the smallest thing would make me responsible for all of it. Derek left after an hour or so, and his wife stayed behind. I started my revenge. When I was doing my assessment, I noticed that most of the building did not comply with city regulation and did not adhere to the registered and approved plans. There were multiple safety hazards, and all the plumbing and electrical work were completed by unqualified and uncertified people in an attempt to save money. Also, the pipe in question had been leaking for a few weeks at least, getting worse by the day, and finally causing disaster, which means their water bill would be astronomical at the end of the month, unless a qualified plumber endorses a rebate with the municipality. I called my contact at the city, let's call him Donovan, and notified him of all the regulatory violations, safety hazards, and non-city compliant installations on the property. I also told him of the possible water bill. He promised to be there the next day. I immediately started photographing and documenting. The following morning, my contact was there at 10. He had a field day. He informed Derek's wife of the calamity that was to come. They would be forced to tear down all of the building additions, remove all the uncertified plumbing and wiring installations, have the plans reapproved and start from scratch, which is an estimated loss of approximately $950,000. Derek was there in minutes. He was livid. He quickly threatened legal action, but Donovan simply told him that he had more than enough photograph evidence to have the property declared invalid within a week if Derek did not comply in writing. Donovan reminded Derek that he does this for a living and that the city has more legal resources to waste money on. I left Derek an invoice for my time just to smear salt in the wound and took my leave. Later, he called me and called me every name under the sun. I remained silent and he hung up. He went on a Facebook rant about me, which was a bad idea. All of the community stood up for me, and it started a storytelling competition where all kinds of people revealed stories of unsavory things Derek did to them in the past. Apparently, Derek has always been a jerk. He never changed. One day he called me and asked to meet. He sounded defeated and depressed, so I decided to meet and see what's up. I met him at a local busy convenience store. I know better than to take Derek the Weasel at face value, so I noticed quickly when he laid his phone screen down on the table. I knew he may be recording the conversation. He apologized for his behavior, which surprised me, and told me that this whole dilemma has all but bankrupted him. He told me he took out a loan for the building additions and cut corners to save money, that everyone does it. He showed me the water bill, which was nearly $80,000, a problem easily erased with a qualified plumber's signature and endorsement. I refused. He got irate again. Then he asked me, "Why did you do this to me? I know I was a jerk to you when we were kids, but I don't deserve to have my and my wife's lives ruined because of mistakes I made when I was a kid. What kind of person are you? You told me I was in good hands. I trusted you. You assured me you would help me, and then you stabbed me in the back. You quoted me only a few hundred and told me not to worry." I replied, "I said no such thing." He says, "Stop lying. You told me that it would cost a few hundred, maybe less. I heard you say it. You promised to help me, gave me recommendations. Why are you doing this to me?" I said, "Derek, you must have imagined it." I said, "Derek, you must have imagined it." I looked him in the eye. He knew exactly why I said that. The same thing he told me almost 20 years ago. I repeated it just to drive it home. "You're being a baby. I never quoted you for anything. You imagined it." He knew I was destroying him financially because of a Batman action figure he stole from me 20 years ago. I could see it in his eyes, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. His expression was a mixture of astonishment and disgust. I looked him dead in the eyes for a few seconds for effect, then got up and left. I slept like a baby that night and had a goofy smile all week after. He tried calling a few times, but I sent him a text stating that further harassment will be met with legal action. Derek, you know what your real name is and what mine is. If in the future you read this and realize how I screwed you over, remember how costly that little Batman action figure was to you after years of accumulated interest in karma. The look of despair on your face when you realize why you are ruined was delicious. I cackled maniacally on that drive home from that convenience store. It was time for you to pay the piper. And if you think this will help you legally, go ahead and try. It won't, so don't waste your time. Or rather do, waste as much time and money. I welcome being even more of a financial inconvenience to your life. Freak you, Derek. Do you guys think OP went a little far with the revenge here? Or do you think the 20 years of bullying PTSD that OP had to deal with made it more than worth it? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. And by the way, if you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons as well. Our next story is Old Fart Gets His Revenge. Revengetastic. This story was from my grandpa, who knew this guy when he was growing up in the 1960s. So we'll call this guy Henry. He was old as crap when the story took place. In New Mexico in the early 1960s, Henry owned a decent-sized ranch. Now Henry was a cool dude. In his younger days, he fought in World War I and was rumored to be a gunfighter in the last days of the Wild West. He was also rumored to be associated with the mafia in Chicago in the 1920s when he went to college. Henry had about 15 ranch hands and 3 sons. He had lots of cattle and land. His youngest son was in the army at this point in time, and the other 2 had other jobs. A lot of his ranch hands were black, and some were refugees fleeing racial violence in the East at that time. So one evening, his guys were attacked and beaten up, and a couple of his cows were killed by unknown attackers. But it was pretty obvious it was the guys in the white pointy hats. After assessing the situation, he couldn't really do much, and the police were useless as the town police force was pretty much useless as it had like 2 guys. These attacks continued for a couple of weeks. No one was beat up, but some cows were killed and fences and stuff were destroyed. Henry received a note saying that he had to get rid of all of his black workers by the end of the week, or they were gonna burn down his ranch and kill everyone and everything. So he kinda said screw this and called his son, who just happened to be on leave. His son and a couple of his army buddies were on leave, and they pretty much had nothing else to do but come over. He was also really good friends with a biker gang in the area, who he probably helped hide bodies on his land with, so they come over and helped him prepare. No, he didn't want the police involved as he was an old freak and did things the old-fashioned way. So he sent a couple of ranch hands over to the town to get drunk and distract the police, and he would bail them out in the morning. Basically, it was 2 underpaid cops trying to contain the drunken madness in a bar in a small town in the middle of the New Mexico desert. So one night, the white pointy hat guys pulled up ready to trash the place. The remaining ranch hands were having a bonfire and seemed completely oblivious to their impending doom. They were strapped though. Henry had his son and his buddies and the bikers hidden in the barns and sheds ready to attack. When the pointy hat guys showed up, they had gasoline cans and some weapons. There were about 10 of them. Basically, it plays out that the cowboys all acted drunk until the bikers and soldiers showed up and surrounded the pointy hat guys, and then they pulled their guns out. Now, I never heard if anyone was killed or if he just gave them a good scare, but there hasn't been a single racial incident or animal murdered in that town since then. Also, Henry died a couple of years later from cancer, probably because he smoked and dipped for like 60 years, because it was healthy back then. Anyway, Grandpa was cool, and he knew a lot of cool guys like Henry. I'm not gonna lie, I'm sure there's a mountain of stories that happened both in 1920 Chicago and also in the New Mexico desert that honestly we'll just never hear about, and the ones that we do hear, they're kind of really crazy. But I mean, I guess that's how it was out there with so few people around and a lot less policing and connectivity. This next story is Betray Me? Welcome to Heck. I, 40s, dated a man, 35, for less than a year. I met him here on Reddit. It was serious, intense, and fast. I love yous, proposed marriage, the whole shebang. I was all the way in. He ended it out of the blue one day a couple of months back. What he said prompted my sixth sense to go positively crazy. I did a tiny bit of research and poof, there is his very married self and his lovely wife, 30, on Facebook of all places. Yes, I'm stupid. He told me he was divorced. You're supposed to trust the people you love, right? I confronted him, told his wife, then went into shock. Turns out I'm one of at least 100 women he slept with or been in a full-blown relationship with in the full decade he's been with his wife, married only 3 years. Many of them have contacted her over the years. She shrugs and stays. She tracks his GPS, sees he's cheating or had the feeling that something is wrong and does nothing. He shows no remorse. One thing he texted me when I confronted him was, "I was just supposed to freak you, then leave." I didn't. He was in my city for almost 4 months for a job, several states away from home. He told his wife I was only his girlfriend in her mind. That crushed me. The cold cancellation, I'll never get past it. Apart from the betrayal, there was also the grooming, and I don't mean sexually. He was effortlessly abusive. He manipulated me from day one. I'm a lot like his wife. Same body type, deeply loving, attachment issues, forgiving, empathetic caretakers. Women like us are often safe harbors for broken men. Never the freak again. Never betray a woman with a healthy sense of justice who also wanted to be a private investigator as a kid. The revenge. Publicize, demonize, fire. I started a Facebook page, screenshots of so many indiscretions, a full narrative on just how messed up he is. I sent links to 10 family members, spoke with 3, the jig is up. They had no idea about the cheating, the lying, the atrocious behavior. So far, my favorite part? I got him so fired. Emails to HR, legal, his boss's boss, and of course I CC'd him. Screenshots of him bad-mouthing them, wanting to sleep with subordinates, drug use, hidden DUI, his temper, all of it. Anything that he 1, did or said, and 2, would get him fired. The things I sent to his job? 1, the text of a long post on Facebook detailing how freaked up he is with all the specifics. Mental illness, cheating, etc. I sent the link to this post and my profile to many, 10 total, close family members. Most didn't open or read the messages. I deleted/indent the ones who hadn't seen it. His wife's longtime best friend talked to me. She had no idea about most of his actions. I emailed the text of the post to HR, legal, his boss, etc. 2, links to posted text screenshots of his bullcrap on the Facebook page. 3, I emailed screenshots of text messages detailing the following to HR, legal, etc. 1, his DUI, his second that he had in January that he hid from the company. 2, screenshots proving he slept with a contractor and housed her in his hotel during the job. That might be fraud if they were expensing both his room and her room. I didn't mention that in any email. 3, screenshots of his lost weekend doing coke and ecstasy. I do none of that and was horrified I couldn't contact him those days. He disappeared for 2 days, when he would have been working on the job site. 4, screenshots of describing how much he hated his boss, executives, coworkers, because they were all idiots. 5, screenshots of his violent temper where he apologized for yelling at me and others. 6, screenshots of text talking about how he should quit and take the 2 friends he had there with him. 7, screenshots of texts where he talks crap about the CEO. 8, screenshots of his dating profiles in company-branded clothing. And 9, text screenshots of him detailing how hard it is not to lash out and be mean to people. Depression, mental illness. He's a traveling project manager for an engineering firm, and he's a mess. But it was a slow trickle seeing all of this behavior. He's been doing this work since 2005, moving his way up the ladder to the low 6-figure salary he used to earn. Sometimes he's in a city for 4 months, sometimes a few weeks, almost always west of the Mississippi. He lives in the South. Today, I read an email sent to me last week confirming he's fired. I jumped for joy. The goal? Go home, stop lying to women. Why does this matter? Why does he need to stop traveling all the time and go home? Because his job is everything to him. He travels 90% of the year. He hides in it. He uses it as a weapon against his wife, so many women, and against any accountability. He said this verbatim in texts. He loves the work he does more than almost anything in the world. It's his only escape and relief, and the only thing he's good at. Losing the job is the nuclear option. Short of hospitalization, he's home now, trapped, no more freedom to use and abuse women at will with no consequences. He's furious. Good. He knows it was me. Good. But he'll just find another job, you say? Oh, I'm counting on it. That's phase 2. I'll email them too. And the company after that. And the company after that. It's a pretty simple email, just gotta press send. If he changes and becomes a decent human being, great. Too late. Enjoy this destruction you brought upon yourself. This is for all the previous girlfriends you messed over. Mwah. The Facebook page is still up and will remain visible for now. No, I'm not going to post the link. Too much identifying information. I don't want to destroy his family. I want him to stop hurting women. I'm hoping this will 1. Really upset him, and 2. Spook him into getting help. One of the last things he said after I confronted him was, "I know how this ends," meaning his wife will never leave him and he'll face no consequences. Think again, kid. Honestly, I support OP fully. I'm of the opinion that if you get into a situation with somebody else where you're saying you're committed to them, you express that you love them, and you turn out to be leading them on and you turn out to be this vile serial cheater, this dude was super scummy, has some serious issues, and considering the sheer number of women he backstabbed, you can't say they didn't have it coming. Somebody was going to do something, and that somebody was OP. Our next story is A Man Harassed Me, and I got his retirement benefits taken away. So this took place over 3 years, give or take some. I, 29-year-old female, left the military and picked up a contracting job in the same field. While I was starting my new career, I was also leaving an unhappy and abusive marriage. My ex-husband, 29-year-old male, was a store manager at a GameStop, and when asked if he gave military discounts, he would give military discounts and ask if people knew me on base and what I was up to. A man we'll call Bubble Bass, 35-ish-year-old male, actually worked for me, and the two of them bonded over their mutual hate for women. Bubble Bass would refer to me as a tramp and tramp at work, and even went so far as to attempt to get my home address to give to my ex. I reported the incidents through proper channels and had to get a new apartment, but unsurprisingly, the military did nothing to Bubble Bass. So I decided to keep my eyes on him and wait until he made another misstep. Over the next 3 years, working with him was horrible. He would undermine my authority in the section by telling junior people I was stupid, being intentionally insubordinate, and publicly talking about how he was exploiting the foster care system to make money off the children he was supposed to be taking care of. About a year ago now, another girl, 20-year-old female, came to me and told me that Bubble Bass was approaching her in a way that made her uncomfortable. When I pulled up their chat logs, Bubble Bass was begging her to hook up with him even though he was married, and she was repeatedly telling him she wasn't interested. I convinced the girl to report Bubble Bass despite her hesitation. During the investigation, while I was interviewed, I spared no detail about what exactly Bubble Bass was doing and saying to include fraud, waste, and abuse of government assets and systems. I kept a literal crap list with dates and times. As things turned out, there were about 4 other women at our base Bubble Bass was sexually harassing. Bubble Bass went to non-judicial punishment this week and lost everything. He has 18 years in the military and was 2 years away from a full retirement. He lost his clearance. He lost his foster children. He lost his honorable discharge. He is literally starting life over in his 30s with a discharge that shows he sexually harasses women with no benefits and 18 years of training in a job field that's only relevant if he has a clearance. I have no sympathy for a creep like this who's trying to prey on young girls. This dude's halfway through his 30s and he's trying to pressure some 20-year-old girl who's clearly uncomfortable and wants nothing to do with any of this, but had to be convinced to report it. This dude was just creepy and preying on people, and they flat out deserved losing what they did. Our next story is My Grandmother Almost Killed My Mother's First Fiancé. My grandmother told me this story and I wanted to share. This all happened in 1985, so this was before security cameras were a household thing. Plus, this happened in Bum Freak, Georgia. My grandmother Clara told me that when my mom, Angela, turned 19, she got engaged to a man. Richard, his actual name by the way. Clara noticed that he was very controlling, i.e. she couldn't use a phone, the landline, and he forbid her from going to family events. Clara's final straw was when my mom called her in the middle of the night crying, saying she couldn't do it anymore and that he'd been hurting her. By this point, they'd been together for almost 2 years and had my older brother. Clara told my mom to go to my great-grandfather's house and stay there, but tell Richard that she was going to her house. My mom did as she was asked and Clara waited for him. He eventually came in the middle of the night, yelling that Angela needed to come home and stop acting like a child. Clara told Richard that she was inside. He went in, and Clara came in behind him and hit him over the head with a bat that she had set beside the inside of the door. Richard fell to the floor, and Clara hit him several times in the legs and arms, breaking one of his arms and fracturing a rib. When she was done, she told him never to come near her daughter or he would be in a ditch next. He never came back. Pretty sure he burned my mom's stuff, but she didn't care. I definitely think this took place kind of in the olden days, or at least, a while back. If this happened in more modern times, as much as the guy might have deserved it, I don't think it would have ended as cleanly for Clara as it did here. And our final story of the day is Dad breaks into our house, we make his life heck. My dad is not a good person by any means of the word, and this is going to involve some serious trauma. The characters are Dad, the worst father of all time, Mom, biological, Ryan, my twin brother, Keon, my older sister, and Dusty, my stepfather. The before, way back when Keon was born, Dad had already fallen off the wagon. The first thing he ever did was physically force Mom into doing drugs to make sure she stayed with him. Following her birth, things only got worse. While Mom would do what she could, Dad was not happy about having a kid. He'd lock Keon in her room for days at a time, because obviously you can't make meth while hearing how hungry your child is. 2 years later, Mom was pregnant with Ryan and me. She immediately tried quitting the drugs and had some success, but having meth in our system, we were at serious risk. Ryan and I were born with huge complications: premature, barely breathing, and weakened immune systems. After that came the worst few months for Mom to endure. While having one kid made Dad angry, having 3 made him fly completely off the handle. It was at this time Mom made the hard decision to call the Department of Children and Families on herself. She knew we weren't safe and wanted a way for us to escape this situation. Mom willfully signed away her rights to us, and Dad of course wanted to fight. Both were arrested for child abuse and endangerment, don't cook meth with kids in the house, as well as the drugs. It took 4 years and hundreds of letters for Mom to get into rehab. As this was happening, my siblings and I lived with our grandmother, who we grew up calling Mom. My grandmother had no intention on fully adopting us, but she was left with little choice after a few years. It was either adopt us, or we would be taken into the Department of Children and Families' care. Life was better for us mostly. There's a reason I never mentioned my adoptive father, and we were safe. After a few years in rehab, Mom was able to get back in touch with us. She was welcomed, and I ended up crying because I found out my adoptive mom wasn't my real mom. We did get to leave kindergarten early the day she came home though. We grew as a family and it was good. After a few years of this, my adoptive father left the picture. Now everything is actually great. My grandmother passed away in 2017. This was hard for everybody, but especially for Mom. She was devastated, losing the one person who believed she could become clean, a good person, and a great mother. Now, Dad gets out of prison and goes back in every few years, and he usually tries to get in touch when he does. This year was different. We didn't have our grandma to make sure everything would stay safe, and Mom didn't think she could handle seeing him. The mistake? The day comes to bury my grandmother. It was a particularly warm November day. We're all having a hard time and don't deal with grief too well. I stayed with Mom the entire time, while Ryan went to our other grandparents to help out. Keon stayed in her room the whole time. We occasionally checked in on her. Night falls and we're looking through old pictures of Grandma. We were finally able to stop crying. That is, until we hear some heavy banging on our door, followed by it swinging open, and in walks Dad. He goes straight to Keon's room, and Mom is simply frozen. This is the first time I've ever seen her this way. He eventually leaves on his own after some screaming and making Keon cry. He ended up taking her money and then hitting her. Dusty's already called the police already. We have a police scanner. Dusty's been outside the whole time, and as soon as Dad left, he went to confront him. Mom had to snap herself out of that frozen state and called Dusty inside. She didn't know if Dad was armed or anything and didn't want to take any chances. Dad goes across the street and pulls stuff out of his pocket as the cops pull up. He was dumping his bath salts right in front of the cops. He ends up getting arrested and we get a restraining order. That's not the last we see of him though. Over the next few years, we hatch a plan to make sure he regrets ever threatening our family again. The plan we managed to come up with was initially supposed to be petty and mildly inconvenient, but it ended up being so much more. We were just going to call the police every week or so on him. If he had something he wasn't supposed to have, back to jail. This didn't work out as planned, and the turnout was much more severe. Dad gets out of prison and lives with his mom. Now, the problem with this is that we regularly go visit our grandparents, which means he'd either have to leave or we couldn't go. I'm going to call my other grandma Nana to keep things more coherent. Nana would always make him leave if we came over, no matter what temperature, time, or weather conditions. This would also apply to whenever we stay the night. We visited Nana so much after knowing what she'd do to see us. This was just our way of saying screw you to our dad. The thing about this meant that he was essentially homeless. He didn't have a car and could barely find a job. When a job did hire him, he'd post in or Nana would tell us. We'd give them a call and have them do a drug test. He always failed the drug tests. So now he's essentially homeless, having the police called on him and on drugs. He gets tired of this pretty quickly and goes back to Nana's when we're there. A clear violation of the restraining order, so he gets fined. This isn't a meager amount of money either. This ruined his savings. So now he's also broke and got kicked out of Nana's. Now he starts to realize he's pretty screwed. We call the police for a suspicious man sleeping on the sidewalk, and he had drugs on him. Back to jail. At least he had a bed. After a few times of this, he's finally broken, devoid of all hope. He manages to get Nana to let him stay there again, so now we get more updates. This has been going on for months now, and we weren't going to stop. Job gone, home gone, money gone, drugs gone, hope gone. He actually started to be clean for a bit. Hard to get drugs if you can't buy them, and when you do, they immediately get confiscated. That is until he finds a new woman. He gets back on the drugs thanks to her money. So what do? Get her arrested while he's gone. We're being extra careful not to get him arrested anymore, since he'd end up in federal prison this time. After so many times getting caught with drugs, our state sends them to federal. Now we've taken away his girlfriend too. The effect, all of this has worn him down. He's gone. Anytime he'd regain even a tiny bit of hope, we'd snuff it out. He eventually tries to end things with a gun that he's not supposed to have, and he fails. So now we have to watch him suffer in the hospital while knowing he gets taken to prison as soon as he heals. We had to make things worse for him. We couldn't let the times we didn't call the police go unnoticed after all. We hide some drugs and ingredients in his dresser, easily noticeable when the police come to search. He now has quite a while in federal prison. I don't think I have any room to comment on this other than saying that this certainly was a nuclear revenge. That said though, that's all the time we have for today. If you want to hear another crazy revenge story, click on that left video. Or if you missed my latest video, click on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.